Hi, and welcome to the update for Module 2. One of the most important takeaways from the chronic disease chapter is that an estimated 90 to 95% of chronic disease is preventable with a healthy lifestyle. That's almost all of it. That's amazing. You know the basics. You know that you should be physically active. You know that you should manage your stress and your weight, and you know that you should have a healthy diet. This course is going to help you discover some of the fine points of those important things that you can do to prevent those deadly diseases that are frequently caused by our Western lifestyle. Many of them have to do with exercise, so we're starting with that. Sometimes cardiorespiratory, also called aerobic fitness activities, can be hard to define, and I have students who frequently get confused at some of the ones that they aren't sure where they should place them, in the aerobic or the anaerobic categories. So, did you just run 5 miles? Definitely aerobic. But then, did you cycle for an hour? Yes. Did you play soccer? Wait, is soccer a cardiovascular fitness activity? It is if you're a forward and you're running the whole time, and there's not very many times that you have to stop and wait while the ball's thrown back in. But if you're the goaltender, it's not an aerobic activity at all. And if you're in some of those other positions, you may not be running the whole time, and then it's an anaerobic or interval activity. Tennis. Tennis is pretty much the same thing. For tennis, if you're playing against yourself and you're really good and you're playing maybe against a backboard and you're running the whole time, that might be considered cardiovascular. But for most people, tennis is played with someone else. You're having to wait for service. You're having to walk over and pick up the ball. There are break times. And so it's an interval activity, and it is not an aerobic activity. Because in aerobic activity, you're contracting those large muscles of the body rhythmically and continuously for at least 20 minutes while keeping your heart rate steadily in your target heart rate zone the whole time. And that's really what you need to evaluate. Do you match all of those items? Basketball is one that I get a lot, and if you're playing a pickup game and nobody's calling fouls, it's probably aerobic, especially if you're pretty good. But if you're playing in a real game and you have a referee and they're stopping for fouls frequently, it becomes an interval activity. It's hard to say definitively, kind of like it's hard to find that, sometimes it's hard to find a distinction between unstructured physical activity and structured exercise, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too. Remember, the keys to aerobic versus anaerobic are: did the activity last at least 20 minutes? Was it continuous? Did your large muscles contract continuously and rhythmically for the whole 20 plus minutes? And was your heart rate elevated into your target zone the whole time? Along with that, when you're doing your VO2 max assessment, in order for it to be valid, your heart rate needs to reach a minimum of 120 beats a minute. So if you've completed your walk and you're not at 120 beats a minute, first you should determine, did you walk your hardest? If you didn't, you probably need to rest for a while and then redo the test and work a little harder. If you think you did, then it's likely you're more fit than you thought you were, and you need to do the 1.5 mile run. Make sure you give yourself at least a 2-hour break in between any repeats or redos. Let's talk about unstructured versus structured activity. So when we talk about physical activity, technically that means unstructured physical activity. And those are activities that you do with a main goal other than participating in an activity. Like if you're playing tennis, your goal is to play tennis. So that would not be unstructured physical activity. Or something that you are doing because you're trying to get more fit. So if you're in the gym working out with weights, or you're doing flexibility work, or you're going for a run, not because you need to get to the store and you only have 20 minutes, but because you want to get some exercise, those things are all exercise or structured exercise. But those other places that you get physical activity throughout the day, those are unstructured physical activity. Those are things like you park your car in the deck and walk to class. Main goal, getting to class. You got some activity along the way. Walking your dog. Now, if your dog's coming on a run with you, that's structured exercise. But if you're walking your dog and stopping at every few bushes, that's unstructured physical activity. Other things that might be unstructured physical activity would be housework, gardening, washing your car. So anything where you're physically active, but your goal is to accomplish something other than exercise or playing a sport, would probably be in the unstructured physical activity side of things. As you begin Module 2, please take time on your family history chart. Ask your family members if you don't know whether or not they have health issues or you're not sure exactly what those issues are. Explain that you're learning how to take control of your wellness and that knowing the health history of your family can help you see where you most need to make your improvements. If you're adopted, one thing that we know is that environment trumps heredity. So your genetics are important, but even more important are the things that you do on a daily basis, and those are the things you probably learned from your family. So if you don't know about your biological parents, use the parents that you have and answer as though they were, which they are, your real parents. It's nice to know those other things, but really things like your body weight, your activity levels, the kind of food you eat, whether or not you're managing your stress well, those are all the things that are the most important in determining what's going to happen as you age. Please remember that we see the beginnings of heart disease in children that have to have surgeries as young as 7 or 8 years old. So this is not something that you're going to have happen to you later genetically. It's got to do with your lifestyle, and that's where that 95% of it being preventable comes in. Okay, if you have any questions or any concerns, make sure you send them to me as soon as possible so I can get back to you. We are on this abbreviated, compressed summer schedule. I want to talk just for a minute about what I saw last time. And there were some really good things in the module Healthy Living Check-In, Module 1 Healthy Living Check-In. Be careful that your goal is truly SMART and that your action plan is describing in a positive way. That means I will, not I'll try to, or I'll think about, or I'll consider, or I wish I could, but I will, and behaviors that you are able to measure. So you want to know whether the behaviors are working for you, and if you don't have a way to measure them, then that's not helpful. I always say that your action plans need pretty much to look like mini goals. So they need to be small, they need to be specific, they need to be measurable, saying things like healthier or more or less or try, or all those things are not part of an action plan or a SMART goal. So make sure that you write things in positive ways that are measurable so you can see how you're doing and see if you need to adjust your action plan because it's not working so well, or you need to continue your action plan because it's working really well, which is what we hope. All right. If you have questions, like I said, about anything that we've covered here or anything in Module 2, or if you're confused about anything from Module 1 once you encounter it again in Module 2, shoot me an email right away and I'll be getting back to you. Again, remember that I'm not accepting any late work. We're on a very short, tight schedule this summer, and so everything needs to be turned in on time. I do recommend that you start submitting about 24 hours in advance of the deadline so that if you have any kind of a problem, you have plenty of time to find another computer, come to school and work in the computer lab, get help from the help desks either at Kennesaw State or from Bareface, or ask me whatever questions you have. All right. Have a great week.